In one of your insightful interviews, you mentioned that the $100 billion is a drop in the ocean, which means that we need more. So I wanted to ask you, what kind of innovative financial tools that you think we need for low and middle income countries, and how can we tackle and leverage debts on this kind of tools or solutions for climate change and climate adaptation?
Right. Thank you so much for the kind invitation, and many thanks for your introductory remarks and inviting youth leaders, including the young parliamentarians. And yeah, I think talking about modern, innovative, fashionable kind of instruments is always attractive, but I think the best thing one can do in this overwhelmed world by crises and lack of trust is to stop the harm. And that is not very innovative. It's a common sense. We're all coming from the region that is always prioritizing the prevention of the harm over bringing the benefits, this common sense. And then the translation in Arabic is درء المفاسد يقدم على جلب المنافع. This is the simple approach to matters, and this topic today is basically about debt. And as much as we can, and I feel very humble, and this could be a day of one that should be reminded to be humble even in the suggestions. I'm sitting next to a man who's been doing a lot in front of the scenes and behind the scenes, the architect with Prime Minister Maya Motley, whom you mentioned her name, in bringing us the Bridgetown Initiative in its first version, the second version, behind the global movement now being embraced, very much compatible with what we stand for at the UN as a special envoy to the Secretary General. There is a proposal that first starts by preventing the harm, and is very much consistent with the Bridgetown Initiative, because there is an emphasis first on debt before we talk about leveraging the tools that we have. So issues related to debt management need to be taken seriously, and that is the same thing. The order of the proposal from the Secretary General, not just for climate finance, but for SDG finance, and thanks God, sometimes it's not being remembered. Sharm el-Sheikh, I hope it will be remembered in the future, not just for the Sharm Adaptation Agenda, not for the Loss and Damage Fund, but seriously bringing climate action where it belongs and as part of the SDGs. And climate finance is SDGs finance, and that is not just a tool of communication to bring more people around the table and to feel that in our action in investing in energy, on investing in water, and dealing better with that through better financing and less debt, unless it's very necessary and very concessional. I think this is the kind of climate finance and climate action that should really be within the SDGs and prioritizing fighting poverty and enhancing equity in the society and across countries. This is basically what the SDGs are standing for: in investment in human capital, investing in infrastructure, and investing in resilience. And having a reductionist approach didn't help us. So anything of innovation, of ideas, need really to be within this framework. And then I would say it's very much important as well, and there is a humble attempt on the Finance for Development report that we did under the auspices of the Arab League and the Ministry of Planning, and you are aware of this piece that we did, the first report on finance for development based on the global framework of the Addis Agenda. And we just said, well, if you need to start right, how growth is financed is your starting point. Issues, basic ones as well. Are we good in mobilizing domestic savings or not? When we are short in savings, are we good in attracting the best part of foreign savings, not debt, but foreign direct investment and portfolio investment or not? And when we are requiring loans, because there could be a good mix of finance, are we good in negotiating debt? And I can tell you an example. If talking about negotiation, I was behind with colleagues at the board of the IMF on suggesting an initiative that ended with the RST. Barbados was one of the first beneficiaries, first wave. our friends in Bangladesh, I was just with them now celebrating the great legacy of a great man who passed a few weeks ago, Salim al-Haq, and they have the best platform based perhaps in the first attempt by Barbados, but what was announced on the 3rd of December here, as parliamentarians, see the best practice. Best practice, the fast speed by Barbados, but with the platform that was created for Bangladesh, IMF money for macro stability with RST, partnering with the World Bank and IFC, supported by JICA, supported by Green Climate Fund, from short-term macro stability to mid-term frameworks to long-term impact. This is the way that you need to go. And we don't need to reinvent wheels, and this could be very innovative. The other thing, I'm not aware, and I'm stand to be corrected, if there is one single country, and I expect one, and now Avi is leading as an advisor to the Inter-American Development Bank, to the very energetic president and colleagues there in the Inter-American Development Bank, what could be transformational in the way that we take budgets of the state very seriously. And this is your starting point. Parliaments were created for accountability based on budget within the Constitution. So are dealing with two things, the Constitution of the state and the budget of the state that needs to be taken seriously. Do we have anywhere SDG-based budget? Because that's a good starting point. And the work that Avi again was part of, the Vera Songui next term, they have the heavy lifting, not in the private sector finance, only 400 billion need to be increased there. Not in the MDBs, 300 billion. Not bilateral finance, around 150 billion to be increased. This is the $1 trillion for the whole world of the developing economies and emerging markets, with the exception of China. But the heavy lifting will be coming from you. Domestic resource mobilization, budgets, dealing with the domestic finance issues, and dealing with resources. Are we ready with that or not? These are basically the big question that should start in parliaments, in partnership with the civil society, prioritizing what governments should be doing. And then we can talk about innovation, and Master of Innovation is here, and including others in the panel. That you can always leverage that. You can deal with the surcharges, and I'm fully behind the elimination of surcharges as my starting point as an Egyptian bargaining, but I know that this may not really be the best outcome. Perhaps fast reduction of the surcharges and doing that immediately, because we cannot afford waiting further on that, and revision of the charges, not just the surcharges. Not quite sure about the debt service suspension when it comes to the IMF. That gets us into complicated area. I'm not talking about particular country, but this could be another discussion, and I have the issue of being a board member, so I cannot say more in this area. But there are other things that I urge everyone to talk about within a more comprehensive, more inclusive structure for finance that is supporting the real economy development, not just to celebrate some sort of transactions here and there without getting them into the context of financing inclusive growth and sustainable development.
Thank you so much for this informative intervention. And you're right, we as parliamentarians have a role, especially on the budgets.
Right, thank you so much. Just of what Ms. Waris just shared with us on the cases of the 14 countries, I think it may raise another issue, a fundamental one, when it comes to capacity and capacity development of countries engaging with international institutions. Capacities are different, same institutions are there, and that's why I said there is a capacity issue. Barbados was fantastic in getting into the fund RST ahead of anybody else. It requires political leadership, but there is technical leadership as well that needs to be commended. Bangladesh has a capacity of negotiators that have been working with and observing their action when they are dealing with the international organizations, that perhaps many people take it for granted, but it's not really easy to obtain because they have serious reforms in their institutions. But for someone in developing economy borrowing from the IMF, saying that they were not aware of the surcharges, they are not new. They are the very same surcharges that they were in the system, approved by the board many years ago, and perhaps it's like the same thing. You may have your credit card. I have the same issuer of the credit card, but you are aware of the terms and conditions. And by the way, in the case of the IMF, they are not written in the small font of fine letters. They are as obvious to anyone. But I would say that under pressure, many countries would just say, let's get this medicine now and then we sort it out later. And actually in many communication that I had, are you aware of the breakdown of what you are going to pay? Because this is many of them won't really talk interest rates, like how much is it? Roughly speaking, don't quote me because the exact figures you can get that from the IMF, but roughly it's 3.5 to 4%, the normal charges, and the surcharges get you to 7% roughly, and you can correct me on that. So this is the total kind of cost, but basically, for some countries, they would say, I borrowed from the IMF $500 million, so this means that by that particular date, in a couple of years or more after the grace period, I'll be paying such and such. This is an issue of capacity development and transparency and negotiations in Parliament about what you are doing today, and the documents are available, they are on the website. If the minister and his team are not aware enough, there should be somebody in the system with basic knowledge of the, not just of English, the English language, but it's by mandate, all of these documents had to be translated in the language of the borrower as well. So I would, well, with all nice assumptions here, I would say that this could be a capacity development issue.
Could I
high-income countries suffering. So are we going to see a change in this area, or like a new suggestion for it?
Yeah, in a good day under pressure, this could happen. Yeah, so keep pushing. Don't give up. We're honoring a memory of a great man, Salim al-Haq. One of the last handwritten words he left to us, don't give up. He was talking about the loss and damage, and you were in the room. So yeah, few things here. Evolution roadmap, if it is going to be a slow one, buying time, consuming the energy of people until they give up, it's going to be a roadmap to irrelevance of the multilateral development banks, not just the World Bank. I know, I worked in the World Bank for many years. The best asset, yes, the capital is important, but knowledge, convening power, legitimacy. That needs to be used by the MDBs, including the IDB that Avi is working for. When are you starting?
Jan 15.
Jan 15. You know, by the way, this is my birthday, but we can celebrate together in different ways. All right? So, good, I remember that because we'll expect from you a lot, not just for Latin America and the Caribbean, but for the rest of the world as well. Because Latin America had this diversity and innovative approaches, real ones that we can capitalize on. But my plea here, yes, the capital adequacy framework is fantastic. It's telling us that we need to be more efficient, but we need more capital because countries like Egypt, for instance, in dealing with these institutions, they are hitting a single borrower limit faster than before at lower level in real terms. So this is the issue of not being, even if you are more efficient and you have the best asset, which is not the capital, it's the people that you need to employ in order to leverage with ideas and partnerships. And actually, by the way, what you offered, Avi, really is very much appreciated of your time, because when I was in government, some of the best advice ever I got from fellow ministers and their advisors, they went through that. That was not, and that sometimes was facilitated by the World Bank or the UN system, but in many cases it was by bilateral approaches. I learned on the matters related to mortgage finance from the Mexicans. I learned the oportunidades approach on the conditional cash transfers from the Brazilians and many of the other Latin American countries. So you are not that far from us. If you the system that we had on the banking side, banking reforms in Australia under the Wallace Report supported my work in drafting the banking law of 2003. I can give you a list, especially for the parliamentarians. In many cases, unfortunately, many of our countries are lagging behind. So let's see those who are ahead of us learn from their mistakes. So I would say here, the leveraging of these institutions need really to be supported by capital, supported by resources. Otherwise, this is going to be an evolution roadmap to irrelevance. And when I said that, and you remember when I said that finance, not just for capital, but required for climate, but for development is insufficient, inefficient, and unfair, many people said, no, you are exaggerating. And then we had a new president of the World Bank who was saying the same thing in different ways, including that he is inefficiency because of the 27 months. So the evolution roadmap is about efficiency as well. So instead of getting your money in 27 months, that should be hopefully 7 months. And why not? With the advances in technology, and you have a pipeline, it could be in 7 weeks or less. The loss and damage operation, which is going to be hosted but not managed by the World Bank, people will be under risk and disaster that they need swift support, is like 911 kind of support that you need really to accelerate with assessment and support for the rescue. So all of these kind of changes, they need the pressure from you as parliamentarians on your governments and in your direct access to the international institutions. I can tell you the very topic of surcharges was not, each time as members representing what's so-called the global south, each time we raised it 3 years ago and more, it was not even a topic of discussion. Now, you were in Marrakesh, some of you, and you know it's now in the, we didn't have a communique for known reasons because of the tough politics and the war, but in the summary of the chair, there is a surcharges that needs to be revised. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was basically a pressure coming from, not from us as members, but from you and those who are independently thinking is not just about us bargaining, but basically this is in the benefit of all. One thing, and I leave, otherwise I'll be fired by my assistant. This is the way it goes these days. More accountable to her than she is to me. What we can really do is basically do something different coming from the UN, and please be there in September in the Summit for the Future, in which the exercise of beyond GDP will mandate issues related to categorization of countries, not just on their per capita income, but based on their vulnerability and based on the natural capital accounting. And Ivy knows a lot about that. And that could be a game changer, not just for the World Bank, but for countries, because all of us are using the system of the national accounts of the UN with the statistical independence of its authorities, and that could be a game changer, not just for the World Bank, but for the whole world. Thank you so much. I have to run.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. But I'm leaving you with better hands, not with good hands.